Wrong button there. Hey, welcome back everyone to another live stream. I'm Ira Wolfe, and today I've got a very special guest all the way from Switzerland. And you might know her, as you can see the name Suzanne Lucas, but you may know her better as the HR Evil Lady. So we'll get into how that came about. And I'm going to take these off because I'm going to glare from my 15 screens that I got going on here. So first message is we both hope that everybody is doing well and is safe, kind of on the new journey. And we're going to be talking a lot today about this work from home experiment, and even more so about the going back to work experiment, what that's going to look like. So there'll be a lot of topics. A couple things I just want to make available to everyone. I've got a lot of free stuff going on, including things like this on the live stream. So while everybody's working at home, I want to make sure that there's a lot of resources, doing a lot of interviews these days. Of course, I got my weekly Geek Skeezes and Googleization show, and hopefully Suzanne will get you back for one of those one of these days. And that's every Wednesday. We've had some great guests. We had just this Wednesday, we had Mike Clark from Gallup. Everybody's probably familiar with Gallup, and we had a really, really good conversation about what some of the trends they're seeing. When I initially scheduled Mike, it was about employee engagement, and internationally, it's typically that there's only 30% of employees that are actively engaged, or at least in the U.S. Worldwide, a lot of people employed. So we were getting a little bit of a feel for that. Doing live streams like this. Today, as I said, we've got Suzanne. Last week I talked to Ed Crow. We were talking about HR's plan B. Do they have a plan B for this? And again, so that's a theme that I'm focused on. There's e-learning, and I'll show this at the end as well, but if you can just, these aren't active links obviously because it's a video, but we've got a e-learning program, and there's a few weeks free trial you can go and explore. There's 2,600 courses. The Kind Quiz is part of Aaron Michelson from Summary. It's a great short quiz. We're talking a lot about compassion and empathy and kindness and what motivates workforces and cultures. So that's another cool tool. There's a trust profile. We just released a remote worker profile because everybody was sort of thrown into this mix. So it looks at what some of the skills, mostly for employers, but if anybody else would like to take it just to see where they fit. And then my book, Recruiting in the Age of Googleization, is still available. So a lot of free stuff. There's probably some things I missed there, including Googleization Nation. So you can go to googleizationnation.com and you'll get updates about live streams and podcasts and other things that are going on in my world and hopefully yours. So we're back to our screens. So Suzanne, first thing we got to get out of the way is the HR Evil Lady story.
Evil
I'm
HR
sure you're
lady.
sick. The evil HR lady. So let's talk about it. How did that come up? Because I think for a while you were anonymous, weren't you?
I was. You were going back to the dark ages.
Well, I've been around a while.
Yeah, so I started blogging in 2006, and at the time I was working for a big pharmaceutical company. Pharma is quite conservative, and so I figured it was best to be anonymous. And I picked the name Evil HR Lady for a couple of reasons. The main one being that people tend to have a very negative attitude towards their HR departments. And some of that is just a matter of the function of the job, and some of it is because we've earned it. I mean, when you get called into your boss's office and the HR manager is sitting there, you automatically know it's not because you've done something good. They never call the HR manager in to sit in on the meeting when they're going to say, gee, Ira, you've just been doing a really great job. I'm really pleased with your performance. That never happens.
Right,
if the HR manager,
I mean, that's a problem just with cultures. I mean, I think it's starting to shift. People are recognizing that, but before was HR was responsible for the once a year performance review.
Yeah. And we're there for all the bad stuff. And so people tend to have a negative attitude. And then we're also the paperwork people and the health insurance people. And none of that is pleasant.
Compliance cops.
That's right. So nobody likes HR.
So you started writing that anonymously because obviously you had a job.
Right.
So when did, I mean, it's only a few years ago though that you kind of uncovered you
like 11.
Yeah, okay. Time flies. Time
yeah
flies.
So in 2009 my husband got a job offer in Switzerland, and we said what an adventure, and it was a 2-year contract. So off we went, and that was 11 years ago. And when we left, I quit my job, and the plan was for me to stay at home for a year or so to get the kids adjusted, blah, blah, blah. And during that time, I started writing professionally. And then I just decided, you know what? I like this, and I'm going to stay with this as an independent person. So that's the story.
Excellent. Hey, and I just want to let everybody know, as I'm looking away, I'm not bored. I'm not checking my text message. Well, I sort of am. But the platform that we use, which I really love, it's called StreamYard. It works great. So we're able to be on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook simultaneously. So we got people in all different places. The challenge is I don't always get to see the comments that come through. So if you have questions, if you want to ask myself or you want to ask Suzanne a question, you could submit them, and I just got to check multiple screens. So I literally have 5 screens here. Which is for a baby boomer. That's not. I didn't grow up with 5 screens. I had 3 channels on one screen.
That's right, man.
Yeah, that was the old days, right? So you hit on a couple things here, and I really do want to just have a conversation and pick your brain. And nobody knows this. Nobody really knows where we're going. I've been writing this week, and I know you have too, and been commenting in a couple areas. There's literally no playbook. We didn't get into this with the playbook, and the playbook, at least in the U.S., that was written for the government wasn't used. Well, we won't get into politics there, but from a company standpoint, most companies, even if they had a crisis management program, a succession program, a pandemic plan, they didn't anticipate this. They didn't anticipate literally shutdowns for weeks at a time.
Right.
Yeah, and so this hasn't even finished evolving. The story hasn't been written, but we've got to write the next book. We got to write the next story of what does getting back to work look like. And there's a whole host of subjects. So I'm going to just throw that out there, because I'm sure there's a lot of ideas swimming in your head, Suzanne. But again, I'm really concerned. I'm concerned about a lot of people who are unemployed. I'm concerned for people who don't have the skills. They're really suffering at home with the lack of digital skills, technology skills. They don't even know how to do this. They're still fumbling to figure out how to get on a Zoom call or a video call to communicate. But the list of implications and consequences from this are enormous. So I'm just thoughts.
That's a huge topic, and a huge thing. There are a lot of people. I'm so concerned about people who have lost their jobs or who will lose their jobs shortly. And I think a lot of people have this idea that businesses should just have these gobs of money sitting around with nothing better to do with it. And the reality is, when you see those things about, CEOs making this much money, and boy, look at Jeff Bezos and he's got billions. More than half the United States works for companies that have fewer than 500 people in them. A lot of those companies run on very small margins. Yeah. They don't have this. So when your company is laying you off, or putting you on furlough, it's not because they're mean and nasty and the boss wants to take off in his private jet. It's no choice. So I'm very concerned about that. And then I'm very concerned about the idea of restarting everything, because how is that going to even look? Um, in Switzerland, where I am, the government announced that they're going to start easing restrictions on the 26th of April. So it's a little bit more than 2 weeks, but they didn't define what easing restrictions means. Does that mean um, instead of 5 people being able to be together, that they'll say 10? Does it mean that they'll open non-food stores? Does it mean that they'll allow businesses to decide for themselves whether to let people back in or not? I don't know. And in the United States, of course, as it should be, as long as there's going to be a little bit of politics in there, each governor and each mayor has these decision powers over their own people, which makes a ton of sense. New York City is not like Wyoming. And heck, I lived in New York for many years, upstate and downstate. New York City is not like Rochester. It's
Right.
and it's certainly not like, Seneca Falls. It's, there's vast differences and vast needs there. But businesses need to be prepared for this. And one of the things that they really need to be prepared on is how they treated their employees as they were shutting doors. One of the things that we've seen is companies firing everybody via a group conference call. Rent the Runway did that when they shut all of their retail stores. Now, I don't blame Rent the Runway for shutting all of their retail stores and laying off all those people. They were in financial problems earlier. They didn't have any spare cash to keep those people on board. Totally agree with the business decision. Totally disagree with one group call, hey, everybody, love you, see you, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Those people are going to feel poorly against their company. Companies now that are still operating and fighting to try to not have to pay their employees for the time they stand in line to get their temperature checked, those employees, as soon as the economy starts opening up again and other jobs become available, they're jumping ship.
Let me just interrupt you. I've already seen that happening. So and again, I don't know how familiar you are with my business, but obviously I've got the recruiting in the age of Googleization and talking a lot about candidate experience, which fits into this employee experience. But most of my business is pre-employment testing, and you would expectation, and I had this expectation 3 weeks ago, is that my business died. There's no one that is going to be hiring. No one is going to be looking for pre-employment tests. Yesterday, I did 3 demos. This morning, 20 minutes before the phone rang, and someone called me about looking for assessments. There are sectors that are hiring. There's businesses that are still going on. Manufacturing that works for Department of Defense, DOD. They are crazy busy. Distribution, we have some distribution companies. Healthcare, skilled nursing facilities. There are businesses that are still hiring, and then there's others that are proactive. I had one that was looking at ramping up a call center, and they said our plans to open are obviously on hold. It's in Missouri somewhere, I think in Kansas City. But they said what they're doing now is they're recruiting, because they know that there are people looking. I've had probably a dozen, just this week alone, it's Thursday, just this week alone, I probably had a dozen people contact me to say, hey, listen, I just want to let you know my new address. A few of those people are transferring, are moving to a new employer because it was in the works. It just happened to be the timing.
Sure.
But 4 of them have accepted new positions within the last 3 weeks.
That's amazing.
And they're good people. I mean, every one of these are good people. We're not talking about somebody who is working in hospitality, or food service. There's people that are looking. So it's already happening. And soon as those signs, those glimmers of hope, the good companies are going to jump on talent. So I agree with you. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think
No.
most people think everything is shut down, but it is not true.
Well, and a lot of people are working crazy hours. I mean, what the thing that I wrote about today is I am so sick of those, this is the time to do all these great things and to solve, world hunger and all that. Shakespeare wrote a play during the quarantine for him or whatever. Super. And if you're laid off and if you have spare time and if you have the mental bandwidth, absolutely learn a skill, do something. But some of us are working our same job. Some of us are working extra hours and homeschooling children and dealing with all of the emotional thing and finding out that maybe your house wasn't as big as you thought it was because you're going to murder everybody. And, there's all of this stuff going on. A lot of people are working. A lot of people are working crazy hours. I'm in Switzerland. I'm in Basel, and Switzerland's famous for its banking, but Basel is pharma. And everybody that can work at home is working at home. But, I have a friend who's a virologist for a pharma company. He's working 16-hour days. And thank goodness he is.
Not more. I think Dr. Fauci over here must be going, there must be a little bit of a robotics keeping him going, especially a 79-year-old.
Oh gosh, I wonder. I mean, the amount of caffeine that must be consumed right now and among scientists is probably a little scary.
You're showing your age. It's got to be Red Bull.
Oh, that Red Bull has caffeine. This is one of those things my daughter pointed out in the grocery store. Here they've said you can't sell anything that's not essential. So even the stores have things blocked off. And she's like, oh, so I can't buy a sewing machine, but I can buy a case of Red Bull. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, true. So, hey, there's a couple conversations. And again, I want to be able to present some topics, some thoughts that people, especially in HR, but you don't have to be in HR to be thinking about this. This should be management. I read this morning, there was a story, somebody posted something that they had their first shopping experience in like 3 weeks, and it took her like 3 times longer. And I actually went. We were able to go. The local Sam's had opened earlier. Unfortunately, I'm in that age where I can actually get in earlier. So I went down, and what normally our gym is down the street, and I would run over afterwards, and in 15 minutes. I would pick up our salads, whatever we wanted. I knew where everything was. It took me over an hour yesterday. And not because it was crowded, but because, as you're waiting for people, nobody's crammed around the door. Everybody was giving space. And that's a good thing. That physical distancing was a good thing. But, I had my mask on, I had my gloves on, I'm trying to wipe things down. I was so I didn't have to check out. I was using my phone and scanning everything in. It took me a long time. So what my thought came up was, although it's uncomfortable now, and a lot of people are really struggling with this work from home idea, getting the technology, having the interruptions. Fortunately, I don't have kids. Unfortunately, our grandkids can't even come and visit. So there's a lot of things. But when we get back to that normal, whatever that's going to be, are people going to find that going to work wasn't so efficient? That, hey, I can work from home 2 or 3 days a week, and it's actually more productive. On a similar analogy of, hey, it wasn't so productive going to the supermarket when it was busy. It wasn't so productive sitting in traffic for an hour and a half each way every day. All those meetings we used to have to go to weren't so productive, and now I am more productive, and why do we have to go back to normal? So there's a lot packed in there, but
there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of business changes. I saw a funny thing on Facebook that it said, "What drove the digitalization of your company? A, the CEO; B, the COO; C, COVID-19." And really,
the C's.
It's the C's. There's so many companies that thought that they couldn't. And that had old school management or whatever that was like, no, everyone has to be here. And we're still facing that. I mean, there are still managers that want you to keep your camera on all day so that they can make sure that you're working. And again, those managers are going to be the first people to lose employees when when this is over. Because if you're my boss and you say, Suzanne, I need you to keep your camera on all of the time, I'm going to be like, I'm already sending out resumes and I'm ready to get out of here. And so we're going to see some changes there. We're going to see some changes in the Americans with Disabilities Act implementation, because businesses that have argued for years and years and years that working from home isn't a reasonable accommodation are now going to have to say, oh yeah, it is reasonable, because clearly you could do the job back when we were all quarantined. So now you've got to do it as a reasonable accommodation. So there's going to be some of those types of changes that are going to happen, that it'll be good things. Those are good things that are going to come out of this.
Again, and I know one of the big, the concerns that has existed for a long time, was going back to like the ADA, is that companies really weren't hiring. They didn't include some really talented people that had a disability and they were home. Right. And it's like, oh, you can't do this. And so it's going to open up the talent market quite a bit for companies that finally get it. They figured out how to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to happen, and I hope so.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple things. I keep running through these scenarios that are happening, and part of this happened to be you and I both commented on it yesterday. The CDC released guidelines, and certainly a lot of controversy about them, and there's this rush to open up. And I think everybody's considering, Dr. Fauci talks about there's no off and on switch. I keep talking about this isn't coming back from a blizzard or a bad storm or a flood or an earthquake where it passes, the danger's gone, and now everybody can come out of their homes at one time. Even if you come out, we're going to have this, and let's say physical distancing. The social distancing will be able to communicate face to face, but there's going to have to be a physical distance. So when somebody comes back to work, and I'm just looking for people to brainstorm this idea, because I hope HR is involved in this part, and this doesn't become a management decision that is made in the boardroom and says, oh, here's our policies, HR, let's implement them without any hearsay. So you have employers, you have employees coming back, everybody lines up and gets their temperature checked.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
What happens to the people who have a temperature? They're sent home. What's your policy? Are they paid? Are they not paid? If they've been on furloughed, does that mean they're more on furloughed? Are they laid off? What's the policy for that scenario? Once they get into the door, what's the working arrangements look like? If you're on a production line, are people masked? Are they gloved? Are they distanced? Hey, we're going to have a meeting. Where are you going to have the meeting? If you're going to have a meeting, how do you keep that space for everybody? And even if people said, hey, it's safe, we can crunch in a little bit more, but keep a space there, there are going to be people that are fearful. And then here's my classic. And last week on the podcast, we had somebody from emergency management and a psychologist, and also somebody who does from the military. Basically, that was their background. And they do emergency planning. And they said, after a school shooting or after any shooting, a workplace shooting, the first time somebody drops something, a book, a car backfires, people jump. So there's a little bit of PTSD. What happens the first time somebody they sneeze in their hands?
Yeah. I mean, those are all good questions. And when you think about how businesses are set up, and you have people crammed into cubes or into open office spaces, that there's not a lot of space around. And like you said, with a production line, companies can't afford to retool everything to make everybody stand 6 feet apart if that's not how it was before. So you're going to have to answer all of these questions, and you're going to have to deal with all of the changes in how we interact with each other. And what does that do to you culturally? I mean, one of the things that I find the most hilarious is handshaking, because that's just so much a normal part of life. And in Switzerland, it is so rude not to shake everybody's hand when you walk into a room. So like, you go into a room, there's 20 people in there, you better darn well go shake 20 hands. Mm-hmm. And there was even a lawsuit about it where these two Muslim boys refused to shake their female teacher's hand, and the teacher took them to court because handshaking is so important here. And as an American, I was just like, don't shake their hands, just get over it.
Right. So I mean, I know now. I mean, my daughter-in-law comes over, and my son-in-law were over the other day, and even in the house, we were trying to do some distancing. But it's basically and it's a very hugging, loving family, which, so we're doing these virtual, from like 3 feet apart, and that's hopefully that becomes the norm for a while. It'll have to become the norm for a while.
It'll have to become the norm. You're going to have these cultural changes, and especially with the concept of working from home. There's no reason why everybody needs to rush back to the office. If you've been able to successfully work from home now, maybe companies do everybody works 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, or vice versa, and they stagger it so that in the office there's only half of the amount of people. If they open businesses before they open schools, that's going to be an interesting thing. Several states have announced that school is finished for the year.
Yeah, Pennsylvania. I'm in Pennsylvania. That's one of them, and yeah, it's done.
Yeah, and you can't really send everybody back to work with the schools not reopened, because like it or not, schools provide childcare. You say it's about education, it is, but it's also about childcare. And sure, there's summer camps and all of that, but if schools can't reopen, can the summer camp open?
But even if they can, I mean, and especially for really young kids, a lot of childcare centers, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but they were really petri dishes. I mean, you've got a lot of young kids, and again, even prior to this, if somebody had a cold, everybody got a cold, and so as a parent, it's like, hey, I'm willing to work from home, but I still have my child here. So beyond the education aspect, even if businesses call everybody back, I'm not sure everybody's going to go back to the way it was for childcare or daycare in the past. Even cleaning services. Yeah.
Not for a while, they won't, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can't stop the germs from little kids.
We learned that. We learned that. Learned that. So.
I mean, but in all fairness, little kids seem to be the least troubled by this particular virus. Yeah. But
they can become
they are
carriers.
Vectors. They're little disease vectors.
They're carriers. Yeah.
They'll bring it home and give it to grandma, and that's an issue. And all of these things we're going to have to do. We can't wait until there's a vaccine. We can't.
No, that's 12, 18 months out. So, but we're going to have to change our practices. And going back to my original question is rather than talking about, I don't even know what they're talking about, because I know a lot of the boards now are hiring. How can I find jobs? But I'm not sure anybody's I haven't seen any really good discussions that are going to this depth to say, let's take it step by step, going back exactly as I started. Okay, you took a temperature. What happens after that? As soon as somebody walks through their front door, what does that look like? Or I don't care if it's a front door or a back door or a side door. What does that look like? And somebody's going to have to take this as a tree and you go, if this happens, this is our policy. If this happens, this is what it goes on. It's not going. There is no normal. In fact, somebody said this. I wish I knew who it was. We're not going to have business as usual. It's going to be business as unusual. And it's going to be constant. I mean, it's going to be constant unusual.
It is going to be constant unusual. And each business is going to be different. As you said, a manufacturing site's going to be different than an accounting firm. So that's a different kind of a thing. And so we can't just publish a plan. Like, this is how you all come back. It's going to be unique to your business needs, your setup in your office, and what your people situations are. If everybody has no kids at home, then hey, That's great. We don't need to worry about the schools. We don't need to worry about summer camps. We're all good. If you've got a population with a lot of young families, you've got these other issues to deal with. And so each business is going to need to sit down and do that. And as you said, it's very important to have human resources involved in that. We should be the experts in human, just like the finance guy is the expert in the money. We should be the experts in human. And you really need to look at the human side of things and not just the dollars, because if you forget the human side, you're going to lose those employees, just like you're going to lose them if you treated them badly when you shut your doors before. It's just like you're going to lose them if you're not paying them to get their temperature taken while they're standing in line. Those things are very important, and they hit a bottom line. And it's very important for HR to be able to speak the language of business. A lot of people go into HR because they don't really want to do the numbers. They like people. Right. And that's great. I like people. I do, mostly. Sometimes I like people. But if I can't say, look, this is going to increase our turnover. Here's the cost of turnover. Here's the cost of sourcing, recruiting, filling, training, all of that. That's going to cost more than this accommodation that we need to make as we adjust to this unusual situation. And you're gonna lose your good people. And always, 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 you lose your best people first, because they're the ones with options.
And there's still, I mean, what has not been eliminated with this, there's a lot more. There's obviously a lot more people that are unemployed, and there are some talented people. There are people that have a lot of skills that are within that, but the skill shortage has not changed. In fact, it's the gap has probably increased, because there's a lot of people that had good jobs, professionals that are not very savvy digitally and technologically. They're struggling. There's a lot of executives and senior level people, or even physicians. I had a physician call the other day with my rheumatologist, and she was pretty much struggling with doing a video call.
Right.
I was sort of, her head was, I saw like the top of her head, and
yeah, mine
I saw
is pretty bad today too. I keep leaning back.
But she was always, I was basically looking up her nose. She couldn't do that. She had a call. She didn't know how to unmute herself on that. There is no reason for me, because it normally takes me a half hour to get there, half hour to get back, half hour in the reception room. My appointments are normally just 10 minutes. Hey, you taking any new medications? How do you feel? Hey, I'll see you in 8 months, and here's a prescription for your labs. There's no reason that I have to take an hour and a half out of my life to have that 10-minute call, and in the future. But she, on the other hand, I'm very comfortable with it, and they're not. There's a lot of physicians, there's a lot of healthcare, there's a lot of professionals, there's a lot of executives that are now at home. They don't have an IT department to come over and plug everything in and bail them. They don't have their executive assistant next door. Hopefully they have kids that can help them out. But there's going to be a real wake-up call. So there's a lot of people that were doing pretty well, and just as in 2008 and 2001, it sort of becomes the shakeup. It's like, this is a good time to kind of rid ourselves of people who are either on the slope down or weren't keeping up.
Oh, absolutely. There's going to be a great winnowing effect going on. We see how different people react in different situations. And yeah, I mean, the technology thing is a huge change for a lot of people. It has potential to have huge cost savings. You talked about going to the doctor. It takes an hour and a half out of your day to do that, when it can easily be done over a video conference. There's federal regulations that have been preventing a lot of that. They are lifted for this pandemic time. Do we hope that they stay lifted forever? Yes, we do. There's a temporary lift on the requirement for people to sit face to face to review your documentation for your I-9s, to prove you are legal to work in the United States. There's a temporary lift of that. Now you can do it over a video chat. Do I hope that continues forever? Absolutely. That really opens up the remote job market
Mm-hmm.
that way. So we're going to see we've seen some regulatory change. I hope to see more regulatory change. Some of those are, of course, out of the HR wheelhouse when we're talking about FDA approvals and all of that. That's something I can't get into, even though I worked in pharma for many years, but I was HR pharma. Um, but if we can streamline and we can see what we don't need, like you said, we may find out that we didn't really need to have those weekly all hands meetings because it was too unwieldy to do it on Zoom. So now what? Now we all have an extra hour in our week. And we didn't all need to come in every day. I mean, I look back at my life. I spent 9 years driving an hour to work and an hour home from work every day. And so many people do that. So many people do more. And now they're working at home. How many of them are really going to want to get back in that car? I mean, some will. Some people have found out that they hate working at home. They really, really hate it. But some people have found like, oh, this is the best. And businesses are going to have to adjust to that. I think we'll see an increase in the percentage of people that regularly work from home, which is great. But businesses are going to have to plan for that. Your IT structure needs to be different when people are all at home than when they're all in the office. Your IT support needs to be different. Like you said, there's no IT guy to come crawl under your desk and plug in your computer for you. You got to do that on your own. You're going to have to work through those things and make those changes in how you operate. Companies that think that they can just go back to normal are going to be left in the dust.
Yeah, well, there is no life as we're not. One is we've never been able to go back, except with the time machines, and they still are science fiction. But as I write about, I said this all over my book. The line between science fiction and reality was blurring before. It's really going to blur now. But we really didn't have the policies, whether they were government, public policies, or company policies. Even home policies, even with some of the things that we told kids before, no screen time is now, hey, it's all screen time. That's what education. I mean, I listened to Sal Khan yesterday, from the Khan Academy. I was on a webinar with him, and he was talking a lot about education. And there was a huge resistance, and there's still, I know our local school, is allowing in the mornings, it's 3 hours of Zoom, whether they're using Zoom or not, but video calls, and you're interactive. But there's a lot of school systems, there's some states that have outlawed using that type of conferencing. And so it's basically they're learning off of slides, PowerPoints. Ultimately, that should have been banned a long time ago. So is there going to be more remote interactive learning? Is there going to be more homeschooling? Is there going to be more of an opportunity that we're going to move away from degrees and certifications into badges, to prove that you have a proficiency in something? So I think we went from like 2000 to 2025 overnight. Of things that we were hearing, and it's going to be it's going to be interesting. I mean, I've loved that sort of stuff, but I think a lot of companies are going to be really struggling with it.
Well, there's going to be education is an area that will never ever be the same. And like you said, some of them are doing great. My daughter is in high school, and her school, I love them, and they are the best. They keep the exact same schedule. They have every class is via Zoom, and it's just like being in the classroom, except it's virtual. And she found out she loves it. She sits on her bed, she holds the cat on her lap, and she does her schoolwork. And so we're looking at programs for next year where she can be from home. Even though we love her school, I'll admit she's in private school, it's painfully expensive. So when she found out she liked this doing it from home thing, I'm like, ooh, there's a chance to save a few bucks.
Yeah. So it's going to be amazing. I mean, I think there's people that were hesitant on whether the kids would have loved it and the parents don't, but I think there's going to be employers that were hesitant and the employees do, so that they forced their hand. One of the things that I also went up, and I posted this yesterday and yet to get a response. So I'm going to throw it out, but it'll be something I'm pursuing. We talk a lot about the line worker, the frontline people, the servers in restaurants and waitresses and people who work on production lines. But there's this whole executive team, this whole management team that were always sort of excluded from things. They weren't always the most digitally savvy and technologically savvy. I wonder what's going to happen, not from a job, but just from protocols. If if a senior level VP shows up with a temperature, what happens? I mean, it's easy to send the $10, $15 an hour employee home. What happens when somebody on your executive team either refuses to abide by that, and if they've refused to abide by sexual harassment policy in the past? What happens when they don't play by the rules for social distancing? Is that a termination? How do you discipline them? Because companies that make exceptions are going to have a problem culturally.
They are going to have a huge problem culturally. And then, as you said that, I was just thinking about if I was a workman's comp underwriter.
I actually posed that question. What happened? Are these liable? I mean, is not complying by these rules, by physical and social distancing, will you be excluded? Will that be negligence?
Right. I mean, right now it's pretty darn clear. I've spoke with several attorneys about this. Any COVID-19 infections that you say you got at work, if you can prove you got it at work, it falls under workman's comp. That's the limit of your liability. But if I'm a workman's comp underwriter, you betcha I'm going to put in some new rules for the next time your policy renews. And, it will be around these things. And you've got to figure out how you're going to react. Like you said, it's the same with, in the past, companies, and still some today, completely ignored sexual harassment when it was coming from the senior team.
Mm-hmm. Even currently. I mean,
less so currently, I hope, but absolutely. Right. I mean, we look at NBC with Matt Lauer. They did a roast about Matt Lauer and made all these jokes about how much of a sexual harasser he was, and everybody laughed at it. And now he's persona non grata, and we hope that he stays that way. Are we going to see the same thing that we're going to be naming and shaming executives that come in and stand close? And
I mean, they're basically they're ammunition. I mean, they're really coming in. So if you sexually, and I don't want to make light of this, if you sexually harass one person, then that person is affected, and obviously people around them may be affected. But it doesn't it doesn't expose the entire workforce. You don't die from sexual harassment. I mean, it obviously is emotionally uncomfortable, and there are people that have taken their lives, but it's not a death sentence. If somebody comes in and ignore these policies, this is way more disruptive, and I don't think people get it yet.
No, I don't think they get it yet either. And I think there's a lot of people thinking it's just going to go back to normal. And as we said, it's not going back to normal. I mean, eventually we will get a vaccine and we will be able to change how we behave. But this is not the last pandemic. There will be
every
more.
5 years. It's every 4 or 5 years over the last 2 decades.
And we need to figure out how to approach things. And we need to figure out how to maintain companies, how to maintain supply chains, how to keep employees safe when the world is going to hell in a handbasket. So, I also saw a joke about when people are not taking it seriously, you say, look, Las Vegas shut down all its casinos, all the churches are shut down. When heaven and hell agree, then you should probably listen.
In most places, yeah. Unfortunately, we have the casinos are all shut down. Some of the churches aren't. So not 100% agreement there.
Oh, dear.
Crazy, yeah. So, hey, we said we were going to talk for about 30 minutes, but we
I
had
told
our
you I was
thing.
long-winded.
Yeah, well, it wasn't long-winded. It's a great conversation. We've got a lot of people on the call, and are listening and watching, and hopefully this conversation will continue afterwards because everything we do will be available on replay on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So hopefully there's a continuation of the conversation. I know you will be putting out more blogs, as I will.
Yes.
On articles. I know I just submitted one. We both write for. In fact, Meredith Sweeney said hello on the chat line. She was listening. But I know we both write for Cornerstone On Demand Rework. And it hasn't been posted yet, but mine was about some of these questions we talked about today. Is how should companies be planning for that going back to work? And I limited my list to like 5 tips, so that should be out shortly. Suzanne, somebody wants to got a story for you. When they want to read your blogs, how can they do that?
Well, you can go to my blog, evilhrlady.org. You can Google Evil HR Lady. I will pop up, and you can follow me on Twitter. I'm Real Evil HR Lady there, and you can join my Facebook group, which is Evil HR Lady, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And as long as you're not sending me creepy pictures of yourself, I will connect with you on LinkedIn. So I'm easy to reach, and if you want to email me, it's evilhrlady@gmail.com. So I'm easy to find. Please find me. Please reach out. I love to hear from people. I love to have conversations with people.
And I encourage for those of you who don't know who Suzanne was before today, she's got her. I will tell you, you're one of the few people who has consistently spoken out, been honest, been candid, brings up some of the really tough issues that we don't always hear about in HR. There's a lot of good things written about HR. How do you build a culture? How do you engage people? How do you hire better? How do you recruit better? There's all those tips. You really bring to light some of the issues. So, you're always, every time I see one of your blogs, because I'm not in compliance, that world, sometimes I scan it, but oftentimes, they're really thought provoking. So I encourage people to follow you.
Thank you so much.
And follow both of us on Cornerstone, on Rework.
Yeah.
You can just search for
I'm
our
right
names.
there on Rework.
Yeah, we've got that. Suzanne, I appreciate it. This is a great conversation. I know we don't get to talk a whole lot together, but this was fantastic. Hopefully we can do it again. Fun. It's going to continue. This isn't going back to the way it was. So if there's something else that's hot, that's hot on your mind, you want to chat with somebody, let me know. Happy to do that. For everybody else who is listening, I thank you. Next Friday, I'm doing another one. Watch for the announcement. You can go to, let me pull this back up here just a second, Googleization Nation. So just go to GoogleizationNation.com and you'll get updates. So next Friday, there's another live stream. We'll continue this conversation. My guest next week, we're going to be talking about crisis management, and we're certainly in the midst of that. And don't forget to go up to, I'll keep this up through the rest of this. You can basically download any of the podcasts, the live streams, free learning courses, the Kind Quiz, the Trust Profile, and even get a free copy of my book at join.googleizationnation.com. So I will take that off so we can say everybody goodbye. So I hope everybody continues to be safe. If there's an issue, if there's a question, please put it on the comment box or contact us individually. Also, if there's something you want us to talk about, whether it's Suzanne or another expert, please let me know. I'm planning to do these at least once or twice a week, plus the podcast. So we've got a lot of good interviews lined up, but if there's something specific, let me know. And until then, thanks very much. Thank you, Suzanne. Stay safe. Enjoy Switzerland. And see everybody later. Take care.
Bye.